So today's session is all about Ofsted and the Three Eyes, and actually we've been really fortunate the last couple of weeks to have some really great guests. So we had Chris Chilito from Elite a couple of weeks back. We had Glenn Hoy last week in a really insightful session, and this week is certainly going to be of a very similar caliber, if not a little bit better, without bigging Mr. Kev Holland up too much. But Kev's going to join us and discuss Ofsted and the Three Eyes. So some of you will be sat there now and you'll understand what the Three Eyes are. Some of you might have no idea, but this session is really to give you the insight from Kev's expert knowledge on this, and hopefully to point yourselves in the direction of how this might affect you within your role. So, Kev, I might just pass over to you just for a couple moments for you just to maybe give a bit of an introduction to yourself and a bit around your background and kind of how you've ended up working with us at Premier Education.
Pleasure. Morning, everyone. Good to see the engagement on the last session. Loads of really great bits to pick up on there. So as it says on that beautiful slide, my name's Kevin Holland, and my grand title is Head of Child Journey at Premier. I started teaching back in 2000, and PE was my specialist area. And in the secondary world, after a few years, qualified as what's called an advanced skills teacher. So basically, I had a mini Ofsted of my own. So I have an Ofsted inspector that came in and assessed me, teach some lessons, and spoke to kids and parents and staff. And then I went on to be a director of sport in a sports college. I started off in Hampshire, moved my way up into London, across to Suffolk in Ipswich. And then after 16 years of that, and being a non-substantive head teacher in a secondary school, I made the move up to Norfolk to be county PE advisor. So took over from a predecessor that worked fundamentally in primary schools, and so took over from him, delivering qualifications to TAs and teachers across the sector, really. But with the broader background I had in secondary education and leading curriculum and change, and making sure all of the statutory mandatory requirements were covered, I started doing a lot of other things. So I was really fortunate to work with an organisation called Kunskapsskolan, which is a Swedish company who have an awesome kind of pedagogy around teaching, which is child-centred and goal setting, really kind of great for people like myself who are sport orientated. So writing curriculum and making sure that it was fully covered everything that's needed, something I've been doing for about 8 years. And then when I first started working at Norfolk County Council, I was invited along to Premier to look at the schools portal and the BMS and how you guys were doing things from a planning and an assessment perspective. And then a year ago, had the opportunity to come along and join everyone. So that's been my journey. I understand curriculum as well as I think I can, and I understand PE as well as I can. So joining the dots is what I hopefully will help you do today.
Brilliant, thanks, Kev. Really good. So I think it's great for us to have Kev with us, guys, today, and I think ultimately we're going to go for a few questions with Kev. Well, first of all, I mentioned at the start of the call around Ofsted and the Three Eyes, so we're going to explore them, and Kev's going to give us a bit of an insight to those. But ultimately, at the end of this, is what I want you to do is I want you to potentially come up with some questions. So throughout this, if you've got questions popping up, write them down on a notepad next to you, and at the end, you'll get an opportunity to speak to Kev and hopefully get a bit of clarity on some of the questions you've got. So first of all, it's what are the Three Eyes? And I'm just going to leave this screen blank just for a couple moments, and just want to see if we get any kind of response through the chat box, or indeed if anybody wants to talk up. But is anybody aware of the Three Eyes currently? So we'll just give you 30 seconds or so. Just let us know. If it's a no, be really honest, tell us it's a no, and that is not a problem whatsoever. That's exactly what this session is for. No, Harry, thank you for your honesty. So, like I said, Heather, good. So actually, hopefully by the end of this call, we're really going to be able to track some learning and some movement here for everybody. Because hopefully by the end of the call, when we ask that question to you, that answer is going to change from not a clue to 100%. I know what they are. So The three I's, Kev, I'll just let you introduce these. We'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but just as they come up on my slide.
Cool. So really importantly, guys, there are the key thing around this session is, although these are what Ofsted have structured their new Ofsted framework into, you will all do your job and we all do our job working with young people, because probably we're morally driven. We want to give children a great opportunity to be healthy and active, their mental health, their well-being holistically. So the key thing about this session, we have these three I's and we'll unpick them: intent, implementation and impact. It will be fundamentally how you're delivering your sessions. But why we thought this was a really important session is this is how schools are judged. So if you can, by the end of the session, and ask as many questions as you want, see how you as an activity professional, an apprentice, anyone working in schools can add value in these three areas through what you deliver. That's exactly what schools are asking for and needing. So that's why it's really key that you have a rough understanding of what these look like and see opportunities for you to have a greater impact.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kev. And again, so we're just going to touch on each area. So intent. Kev, can you just give a bit of detail around kind of, first of all, what does that mean? And kind of, the areas that we as activity professionals might kind of work within the intent side of that standard.
100%. So they when they wrote the intent part of the Ofsted framework, they changed the language slightly to use rich and varied curriculum. Some of you may or may not have heard of curriculums being broad and balanced, and they've just slightly tweaked that. But actually, it's quite purposeful. So the reason why they've used rich and varied is because actually we have a broad range of outcomes we can achieve through any aspect of the curriculum. Why that's fundamentally is because actually, if you think about a session you're planning, the intent part of what you're delivering is actually making sure that the key fundamental learning that you want them to leave that room with is there and really, really clear. Okay, so the intent of a school could be around having a vast range of differentiated opportunities and making sure that all children feel equally valued and every child can access all experiences, opportunities and lessons, no matter what their backgrounds. It's all there for them. Historically, in the old framework, all schools were tested on were the bit at the bottom. Actually, English, maths, science were right at the top of the tree. Well, probably English and maths, and then science came third, and then everything else just added on to the end. So what they're saying is the intent of the school should be much more holistic, much broader, and it's not just about what happens in the lessons. It's about those opportunities and experiences as well. And I think if I frame that in a PE session example, if you have an intent of some learning that's around, let's take the session before, around agility and balance, and you choose to frame that around teaching Key Stage 1 children to move and travel like dinosaurs. If they leave the classroom, the gym, and I ask them, let's say I'm observing, I ask them, what have they learned today? I want them to be talking about agility and balance and maybe coordination. I don't want them to talk to me about dinosaurs. So the intent is about actually how you're going to impact the young people. In this context, it's the whole curriculum. In the overarching context you work in, it's probably PE, and then actually you break it down into your the extracurricular or curricular, and then right the way down into your session. So it's a really important aspect to understand.
Brilliant. And I think for me, just reading that, and I think I just want to maybe paint a bit of an idea, and I want people that are listening to this just to think about how are we supporting the schools within that rich and varied curriculum. So what are you doing in your area? What are you doing personally to support that? And I just want you to think about the different hats you might wear within your role, which are going to support the school within that. So we can sometimes think about activity professionals as being fitted in within one area, but actually it might be delivering products and sessions that are across multiple different areas and achieving different outcomes. So it'd be something to consider for us later, but just think about how you and how Premier as a whole are supporting schools within that varied curriculum. So the next step is looking around the implementation. So Kev, again, a great description there before, and I think that's hopefully painted a really good picture for the guys. What do we mean by the word implementation?
Okay, so this is a leading on from that intent. It's actually, so you take that intent and it's how you actually implement the outcomes that you've identified. So the key thing here is, and what schools are really looking for is, there's a couple of key aspects. So there's firstly the sequencing of the learning that's been identified. So if we talk about something that's not English or maths or specific learning, let's talk about mental well-being of young people. And we know that's an issue within the educational sector. The key thing is how you are implementing that right across the curriculum. So if you've got a really, if you're working with a PE lead or you're working directly with a head teacher, and there's a really great plan for early years, key stage 1 and key stage 2, it's really important that implementation and the measuring of that sits really clearly across each of those year groups. So what is happening in early years, why is that being done, and how does it work positively to support year ones? How's what's being delivered in year 1 help to support what's happening in year 2? So all of that needs to be structured within the kind of curriculum mapping exercise. Now, what's really important is, from most academic subjects are working towards a really clear set of criteria that the children will be assessed on, whether that be English, maths, history, science, all of those different aspects. From a PE perspective, we've got nothing statutory in respects to measurements, but we do know that we have a massive impact on academic subjects if children have a much more positive level of mental well-being and physical health. So the key thing in the implementation part is, yes, continue to deliver high quality physical education. Now that might be specific activities, football, tennis, rugby, whatever it might be, but it might be something more generic. It could be working towards a theme. So if the school's doing something on superheroes, then that fits into all sorts of different aspects of the curriculum. Obviously, you can write about it. You could measure some distances and some speed around that from science. But equally, we could create superheroes using gymnastics or athletics. And then what we're able to do then is implement the broad and balanced curriculum all the way through the school's overarching curriculum. So we can play a part in this. Lots of creative subjects have a really good link into the wider curriculum. And I think sometimes from a PE perspective, because we put specific activities, because within the schools you work in, they might not understand that we're able to develop a more clearly structured lesson, then actually they're probably missing out. So the key thing is to emphasize that we're not just, let's just take basketball. We're not only learning about basketball. When we implement those lessons, we've got other outcomes, other aspects of learning that we want to focus on. It could be leadership, it could be communication, it could be being fair play, it could be rules. So things we already do, we need to pick those out as more central aspects of our teaching rather than just the skills part of it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Kev. I think that's really good. And I think for me, to maybe summarize that, I think it's really important for us to think about the bigger picture, if you like. And we spoke earlier about throughout our intent is thinking about actually it's wider than just that kind of end result. There's a wider piece for us and there's a bigger picture for us to focus on. And I think your implementation is really key for that. And I think thinking about how can you support the learning and the development of that child as a whole through various kind of, used a really good example of superhero kind of cross-curricular themes to support that the whole school within your implementation of their kind of rich curriculum again. So thinking wider than just the activity. So let's not get lost in being a football coach or being a tennis coach. We're there to do more than that. We might have certain focuses during certain activities, but we're there for the wider picture. And I think it's really key for us to know that and to act on that when we're working within school. So brilliant. So the last of the 3 I's is around impact. And Kev, if you could just give us a bit of an overview for the impact.
So these join together nicely, obviously, because a really key part of the implementation, and not only focusing on the skills aspect of your delivery, is that actually we can more positively impact on a wider section of the school community. Because actually you'll all be able to think back to when you were at school and think, oh, just didn't like that lesson, didn't like that teacher. You probably were, it's unlikely you were successful at it, and it's unlikely you were enabled to be successful. So a really key part of the implementation that leads to giving a greater impact is that, yes, you have knowledge, you're trying to work with the children. Yes, you have skills. Yes, you have their understanding. Importantly, they need to apply those 3 things, and then you give them opportunities and experiences. All of those together allow you to impact on individual children in a far greater way. And what that helps us be able to do, if we take some of those some overarching, lots of people call them soft skills, but I would call them life skills. If we can add those and layer those into our physical activity delivery, but align them with what else is happening in the school curriculum, the impact we have, the deeper understanding and the deeper learning that will be created is far more powerful. A good example, if we take something that's not from PE, we take something from the academic world. We could go into a secondary school, probably not now because there wouldn't be anyone in there. We could go into one when they're open, and we could do bar graphs in the first lesson in history, let's say. We could keep following them around, and in lesson 4 they'll be asked to do a bar graph in science, and now you guarantee you will hear them say to teachers that they've never done a bar graph before, because it's got no context, and what it hasn't done, it doesn't sit right across the curriculum, not join the learning and join the understanding. And you'll see that with some of your more able children, they're able to join together the skills and the understanding and the knowledge. But we should do that with not only the skills, with the wider learning. So then we are able to impact the whole set of the community in the schools in a much more positive way. And I think from that perspective, this is where Ofsted are looking around personal development. You'll see within that impact statement, it talks about there'll be greater emphasis on the behaviour and attitudes of the children. So that's where we need to pick up on things like words that are used all the time, is like resilience, for example. Can we tie that in? So we're not only looking to impact our children academically, we're not only looking to impact our children physically and emotionally, we want them to have wider life learning skills that they can use to support them to be a better learner. And there's 2 different things I'm going to tell you about that kind of learning. We often use independent learning. That's a term that's used a lot. And that's where children are able to maybe do a task that somebody else has set them to do. It's an independent task. That doesn't necessarily make them independent learners. We need to support them in understanding how they learn, how they're resilient, what they need to do to overcome challenges and barriers. And then they truly understand their own learning and can set themselves their own challenges. So impact in this perspective is about the breadth of impact we can have on the child, not just specific individual learning moments.
Brilliant, great. And I think just to again further summarise the 3 I's, if you like, is quite a lot, and I can almost guarantee you this kind of model's come up multiple occasions on the sessions you've watched, but we often talk about why, how, and what when we think about planning and a lot of the stuff we do. And I think this model fits into that exactly the same, but it's just phrased slightly differently. So if I just pop back to our slides, we've got our intent that's very much the why. Why are we doing what we're doing, if you like? Our implementation is the how. How are we supporting the schools with that rich curriculum, with engaging the pupil and developing the whole child? And then finally, the impact is the what. So what's happened because of our intervention and the work we're doing? How have we supported the learners, the child with their development on a wider basis than just the specific potential PE outcome or performing arts outcome that we're looking at? So we're just going to ask a few questions to Kev now. So we've got a few pre-planned ones that we're going to talk about, and then guys, if you have got questions, it'd be great to open the floor to yourselves. So Kevin, the first question is, how do the 3 I's affect us individually as APs? And what do we need to know? And what do we need to do now? What do you need to do now to kind of go and impact that? When we go back into schools, how is that going to affect us now we have this knowledge?
Yeah. So this is a really good question. And the one thing I wouldn't suggest people do is to go in and necessarily challenge what a school's PE curriculum looks like, or what necessarily they're asking you to deliver. Okay, so I think that's really important, because actually, although a lot of this work has now begun in schools because they're measured on it, there are actually a limited number of people that really understand how to sort of promote this and improve it across the curriculum, because you'll be aware that really we've kind of compartmentalized learning. It's been maths, it's been English, it's been history, it's been geography. However, in the primary sector, there is a bit more work around themes and project based. So something really positive that can work for you, that adds value to your school and supports your impact in the school, and where you can actually talk about the 3 I's, is to consider what other learning the children are doing. Now, most of you will be in the schools for more than just the time that you're there to deliver the session. It might only be 5 or 10 minutes before or after, but having a look on the school boards, seeing if they have a curriculum map up, so you can see what other learning the children's doing, is a brilliant opportunity to say, can we join some of this together and say, actually, in PE at the moment we're doing dance, we've got X theme, or actually there's some really great links there. So you could be proactive around that. It's not about going and say we could redesign your curriculum. It's not about saying that we don't think we should be delivering tennis in PE. It's about looking at what links might jump out to you that people haven't had the time to think about. And from a perspective of what you can actually do about that, even if that's not a discussion you're confident to have or necessarily want to have, you can just add that into your own planning. So just think about some of those other skills about resilience and communication. That's absolutely, you can add that into your own session plans without any addition or it lining up with anything else, because that can only be seen as a positive. So there's things you can do quite simply, and there's things that could take a bit more time for you to do. The simple things to layer in some learning and some outcomes around the wider holistic child, and the more difficult things to do are to try and actually find some links where you can link it across to the other areas of the curriculum.
Brilliant, great. And I think to kind of echo that is from some experience that I've had on the ground within schools and coming out to see a lot of you guys deliver, was actually one of the best sessions I've seen in the last 12 months or so, was from an activity professional in the London area who had delivered a gymnastics session which was all based around the kind of troll under the bridge story, and it fitted perfectly well with that. I think they were learning that within their English and they were writing stories on that. And he spent a lot of time with that teacher just finding out a little bit about it. And the whole session in gymnastics was about creating bridges. And they kind of used that storyline to go through the session. And the children loved it, and they could tell you so much about that story and all their movements that linked into different parts of that story. And it just created this just wonderful learning environment where you could just see the impact of that session was huge. And actually, it was looking at some of the children that potentially didn't like gymnastics, and we'll all have this with certain sports and activities we deliver. There's a group of children that struggle to get engaged because they don't like it, but actually they didn't even realise that they were doing gymnastics. They were just acting out a story, and it just worked really well. And I think that's an example of how you can use that to boost those engagement of your session as well, as those cross-curricular type activities and topics can really support your sessions. And there's so many creative ways that we can do that, and there's so many creative ways I'm sure you're already doing that. So that's great to know.
I think that they're good points, George. And the key thing is for no one to think, oh my days, you've got to completely change how we deliver it. The fundamentals are, you might slightly change some of the learning outcomes or success criteria you use, and you might have to change or scaffold a little bit more language around that additional learning that you've just mentioned there, George. So it's not about massively changing sessions, but focusing on one.
Brilliant, great stuff. So question number 2 was, has this changed the way that the school will look at our sessions, basically? So whether that's PA, PE, Premier Wellbeing, or goal sessions, is that going to change the way that schools are currently kind of looking at the sessions that we're delivering?
So at the moment, I'd suggest that most conversations I'm having with the network and the feedback I'm getting are asking to see a skills progression map, the sequence of learning from a skills perspective. So I think because schools haven't engaged with this process for most foundation subjects in the last however many billion years, all they're looking for at the moment is that skill. Guys, and all that, we'd all be really happy and we could do those things, and we have that pretty much in place in Premier. However, what it really massively gives us an opportunity to do is have the discussion we've just been having, that we can add way more value, a huge amount of more value. We can do that in PE exactly as we've just discussed, by using some project-based or thematic cross-curricular learning. Okay, and cross-curricular is a term that I try not to use, because I when I was teaching, I would say I've got my cross-curricular link is with maths, and I'm using a stopwatch or something pretty lame it would be. If we talk about co-curricular, it means it's the same curriculum. So what we're trying to deliver is the same focus as the rest of the curriculum, and I prefer that. So PE, we can do that easily. Performing arts, obviously we deliver a huge amount of that support through telling a story or some kind of theme. And I think that gives us a really big opportunity to impact schools in a broader way around performing arts. I've been working with a couple of consultants over the last 6 months to support people in the network, and I will continue to do so once we get back to normal. And the key thing about that will be to do exactly that, offer performing arts short-term schemes of work or plans or individual lessons that either align to what is already happening in school or what is happening on a national platform around specific weeks or days, and making sure that we have the wider impact and engage all children. The PW scenario, Premier Wellbeing, the key bit about that is we know that mental health is high on the conversational agenda on the educational landscape, but actually we're still struggling to get that measured by Ofsted. Personal development in the framework talks about children's mental health and physical health and all of those aspects. So the wellbeing product is 90%, 80% rewritten, and 90% of the way they're ready to get out to the network. So we have, and what we've done is to enhance it, we've added think well. So anyone who hasn't delivered, we've got eat well, move well, sleep well, drink well, and now think well. And that's to make sure that we encompass that element of school. So any school you know that's struggling with that wider well-being, PW is the perfect kind of product to be able to use. And then lastly, from a goal session, so game of actual life, that covers a real broad spectrum across the curriculum. It's been mapped, so all of the sessions and the overarching product maps across the different curriculum areas, and obviously is a different kind of product for us. It's classroom based, but it gives us an opportunity to show that we have expertise in the network, all of you guys that are out there, that can not only show high quality practical and creative delivery, but can also use those skills to support numeracy, literacy, and careers. And careers is identified again in Ofsted framework. So all of our products really directly sync with the Ofsted framework and add massive value to your delivery and us in schools holistically.
Brilliant. And I think that's really important for us to identify is actually these products that we have, and there's some brilliant sessions within each kind of stream of those. There is a real purpose to it. There is a why to why those are being created in that way, and actually understanding that, and hopefully this kind of session has helped you to understand where those individual products fit and how they can help to impact your schools. So obviously we're all really eager to have as much contact time with the children we work with across our schools and our areas. How can we use the Ofsted 3 Eyes to upsell and to retain our schools? So what we want is to continue work with those children so we can have that lasting impact, but also potentially if we think about a lot of the schools that we're maybe just doing an after school club in, for example, how can we as activity professionals, operations managers, whoever's kind of listening to this, upsell and try and get more work within schools to support the children with their development?
Yeah, I think this is a slightly tricky one, because obviously this sits around how we sell ourselves. So we've got the marketing aspect of that, and we all know, and it's no secret, that schools' budgets are struggling. So the key thing here is to talk about how we can add value to what we offer. And there's a few different ways I perceive that we can make that happen. Some of that is just being really conscientious when you are in schools and listening and hearing and seeing what conversations are happening. Because actually, if they're saying there's a certain year group that are really struggling on something, or they're missing an aspect of the curriculum, or you see on the staff notice board, there's lots of key focuses for that half term or that term, you should feel confident that we've built the product offer to align with the 3 Eyes, and we can deliver positive impact through any one of those products. So if you are delivering on the ground, the key thing is to focus on what you see and hear and those opportunities. If you're an ops director, or you're working more directly with the schools, this is where I've had a lot of conversation with the network around looking at what the school's website says or doesn't say, looking at things like obviously PE premium spend and seeing where there might be gaps, looking at Ofsted reports, and looking at governor minutes. So there's lots of things. Now, I wouldn't expect any of you guys that are APs or apprentices to necessarily do that. However, there's nothing stopping you do that, because you can easily add value just by showing and demonstrating to the school you've spent that time to have a look. And I think a bit of a kind of a scenario is I've worked in Norfolk for 6 years nearly now, and there's an organisation called Viscount Nelson Education Trust, and the lady that runs that has been in Norfolk for 35 years, and we all know that Premier's 20 years old, or we all do now, because I've just told you. I've gone to her because I would like to help the franchisees in Norfolk. And when I described what I've been talking to you about, she said to me, her direct comments were, "I thought you just did sport." So never think that the schools or the teachers or the TAs or the parents you're working with understand the breadth of offer that we have. We can offer that rich curriculum support and out for opportunities, and don't be afraid, because the chances are that we can.
Yeah, definitely. And I echo that last point. Is actually sometimes it's good to we've got if we think of it like a game of cards, we hold in a really fortunate position where actually we hold a lot of really good cards that we can play to help schools, if that makes sense. And a lot of the time we find ourselves being really guilty at just playing that same card all the time. And actually the schools aren't aware of the brilliant deck of cards we've got in our hands. So let's try and promote that and show them the brilliant work we can do across all the different areas that we kind of alluded to on the last question. So the last question from us is obviously for yourself, Kevin, as someone who has previously been a teacher and has previously worked with Premier in not only your role now, but in a different capacity as well. How did you, or how would we showcase our provision to Ofsted? And what is the purpose of that, really?
Yeah. So Ofsted, no matter whether you like them, care about them, know about them, ultimately they're the people that give the judgment to schools about the quality of education the children receive. What that fundamentally does is direct a certain number of parents to send their children to, which directly has an impact of the funding that the school receives. So there isn't a school that doesn't want a good Ofsted inspection. Maybe not outstanding, because actually that can be quite a weight to bear, but certainly good. So what we're able to do is, in a range of different ways, align with what Ofsted are looking for. So from personal behaviour and development and personal characteristics, we can support in every way around that. And within the framework, it talks about continued good behaviour in lunchtime clubs and after school clubs. It talks about using high quality external provision. It talks about delivering breadth and all of the things we've talked about. So what we want to be able to do is, when Ofsted call a school, they have a 60-minute phone call. And in that phone call, they will tell the head teacher what subjects or activities they want to see. And then the head teacher has an opportunity to pick on 2 other areas that they feel really confident will tick all the boxes for Ofsted. Now, in loads of different areas across our network, Hello?
I think someone just popped myself on mute. Sorry, Kevin. I don't know who that was, but yeah, continue.
So, but in loads of different areas, we've found that the head has identified PE as a key place for them to actually go and look at. So if we're the external provider who is doing that, that's a massive string to our bow, and obviously really supports the school, but also the added value we have and the quality that we're doing. So that's kind of the key aspect, really. We want head teachers to say, actually, we have high quality external provision delivering, whether it be PE curricula, enrichment, after school, goal, doesn't matter what it is. All of those areas hold a lot of clout if we can get head teachers to direct Ofsted to your section. So the only way to do that is to consider those 3 I's and be really clear on those outcomes.
Brilliant, thank you, Kev. And that's the last one for me. So I'm just we're probably going to overrun by a minute or so, but that shouldn't be a major issue. So I just want to open the floor to you guys. Have you got any questions for Kev at all? Either post them into the chat box, or feel free to obviously unmute yourself and okay, we'll just give it a minute, because people can take a while to type time or load. Sorry, Kev.
Feel free to email me directly if anyone's got any questions that doesn't want to necessarily share.
What we'll do then, Kev, if you could maybe just at the end of the call, just pop your email address into a chat box for people that maybe do want to pick up with you individually, then that would be great. So we'll move on. Already knows that we can come to Kev directly with any questions, which Kev's very kindly offered to answer for us. So, brilliant. I just wanted to leave us with something to think about going away from this. So hopefully that's kind of painted a picture for you. And I think we're always striving to do that little bit better each time we have contact with schools and children. And I think just having that element there and having Kev's insight there has been really valuable for us to understand what is it that the schools are actually looking for from us at times, but also how can we support them. And I think one of the key things, actually reflecting back on that call, is around how actually we've got many aspects of what we can do that fits in very well to what the school is trying to achieve. But sometimes the school might not know that we actually do that, because they sometimes think we just do sport. And actually sometimes it might be they're not aware of how that potentially fits in with some of this intent, implementation and impact. So being aware of that and being able to have that conversation and actually pick up on those signs that Kevin alluded to is going to help us to give the schools more value and support them, and not only that, but support the children within their learning. So again, thank you very much for attending all. Really appreciate your time yet again. Kev's popped his email address in there now, which is great. So feel free to speak to Kevin. And lastly, Kevin, thank you very much for your time. That's really good, really valuable. So thank you.
George.